Welcome back to another great episode of Heart of Honesty. Well, I'm Meg, and I'm Tiffany. And in these episodes, we like to give you guys some great information, real no holds for our conversations about that. So today we are deep diving into counseling. Now let's talk about counseling. I call it therapy because get myself together, get it out, say it out loud, and be like, oh shit. We have the most fabulous therapist on the show today. It's Brooke Kearney. We're going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she does. So go ahead, Brooke.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brooke Kearney, and I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor associate located in the Raleigh area. I personally work with teens and adults and couples. I really love working with people to help them reach their goals, process traumatic events, and learn how to cope with life stressors.
Led you to this field?
That's a great question. I always wanted to be able to help and support people, and I wasn't sure in what way that would be. And I always found psychology very interesting. So in college, I majored in psychology, and initially I was working with kids a lot. I really enjoyed working with children. Um, and I went a more education field route. So I have a background as a school counselor. And I worked as a high school counselor for 5 years. However, in my training to be a counselor, I really enjoyed the one-on-one clinical mental health therapy side of it. And so the more I worked in the field of education, the more I saw the need for mental health counseling and specializing more in that specific area. And so now I work full time as a therapist.
So we're going to jump kind of right in. Can you explain to people the benefit of being 100% like real in the closed room with you? Because what I learned even with my children is they only tell one side. It's like they're afraid to like be dirty or gross or rude or bad, whatever, whatever you're struggling with, they want to look perfect to the counselor. So can you explain a little bit about the benefits of not, what I mean?
Yes. No, thank you for asking that because I think that is something that is really hard for people initially. And one of the most powerful things about therapy is the relationship that you have with your therapist. It is the only relationship probably in your life that is completely one-sided and is supposed to be. That is the power of it. That this person is here to hold space just for you. And so all of your shame, guilt, imperfections, mistakes, everything is fair. And it can be very healing to feel like it's a space where you can share that and it be okay. So, but it is hard. And I think a great therapist or a therapist that works for you will help you create the space and give you, the time to get there. And also acknowledge when, I'm noticing maybe you're not being completely open about this. And,
That's what I was going to say. Can you tell when it seems like they're not really?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll like tell you a story or they'll tell you a situation and then later on there's more details that are added. And that is okay. I think it's never like acknowledging it is never to like shame. It's actually to acknowledge like how hard it is to be open and vulnerable with another person.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, that having that trust and building that relationship, that's why it's very important to pick or select your therapist based on the needs that you have. Like,
Right.
I think if I can't build that rapport with you, then no, you're just going to get the superficial and I'm just going to be wasted both our times because I'm not really going to share and tell you and we're not going to deal with the real shit that we need to deal with because I'm just like, I don't trust this person, so I'm not going to tell her my deep stuff.
Yeah.
So how did you tell a client if I'm not a good fit, let me know? Or are you looking for a certain thing? Like, how do you kind of broach that with them in regards to like, you don't have to be stuck with me if you don't?
Yeah, no, I do that. And I think a lot of therapists, including myself, will do what we call a consultation before the first therapy session so that you can ask some of those questions of what are you looking for? What have you been to therapy before? What helped you to feel comfortable or what are you looking for? What are you nervous about? So you can also share with them a little bit about yourself before that first session. However, there are times when you meet with someone and after a few sessions or you get to know them better, they get to know you, it isn't a good fit. And it is okay to bring up that topic with the client and ask them, how is this going for you? I noticed some hesitancy or nervousness in our sessions? Is there anything that I can do? Would you, I think that's also one of the powerful things. Feeling like the therapist is going to be open and acknowledge these things as they're happening and they're not going to shy away from it gives someone the opportunity to say like, actually, I'm not comfortable or I, want to work with someone else. And then it is, very amicable. There are so many therapists and not everyone is going to be for you and vice versa. So it's really okay to try and find someone that is going to meet your needs.
Now, do you think there's a benefit to in person versus online?
Oh, that's a really great question. I do think it's up to personal preference. There are pros and cons to both. Online offers so much flexibility for the client and the therapist, and it can make it easier to be consistent with therapy. And I do think the power of sitting in front of someone in person, being able to see their full body language, not just, their neck up, or some people don't even turn their cameras on. Yeah, or like people will be driving. And so there's something about really being fully present in the space and being able to see that is very powerful. And I personally prefer to do couples work in person and individuals. I like in person better, but I'm fine.
Yeah, I noticed a huge difference. So we have multiple children. One of our daughters, she always did online, and then there was a random day, and I was like, "Are you actually talking to your counselor? Because what you're telling me tells me that you're not talking to your counselor." And she was the one who said, "No, I feel like I should have it all together, and I should look perfect." I'm like, I am reaching out to your counselor. So then we had an in person, and my daughter was like, "This is so weird. I have to like focus and talk."
Yeah,
Pain in the ass.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's really cool because the therapist said if you need to bring your nail polish in, you can paint your nails, but we're going to talk in person. Yeah. Right. And that's, I guess, another thing I would bring up. Talk about the privacy for children or young adults that I don't think listen to ours, but that you don't share with their parents. Like,
Yes. And this is such a fine line ethically for confidentiality and also, the right that parents have to their children's information. And so a lot of therapists do it differently, but most are very upfront with parents and the child or whoever, young adult who is under 18 of their expectations of like what is confidential between them and what is not. And also the process. Technically, a parent can ask the therapist at any time information about their therapeutic sessions. However, most therapists are really upfront with parents as far as like, in order for me to build trust with your child, some things, it's helpful for things to be confidential. However, safety concerns are never confidential. If they're expressing they are thinking about hurting themselves, hurting someone else, someone is hurting them, that will always be shared. If there are other concerns, because sometimes there's like school concerns or, how they're dealing with a traumatic event, you can let the parent know, like, hey, I can give you like pertinent information and details, but it's really helpful and effective for me to build the safety with your child if I don't share everything. However, there are some parents who are like, no, I still want to know. And then that is, a difficult position to be in. However, I mean, they do have access to their child's information. So you can let them know, like, I will share this with you. Um, and this is how it could affect my therapeutic relationship with you.
what are some health concerns that therapy, and we're basically talking about talk therapy, right?
Right.
What are some mental health concerns that talk therapy would be appropriate for? And then how do you select a therapist? Because maybe I'm just like really crazy. That's not a good word. My bad, y'all. Maybe I'm just having a lot of issues that, okay, well, maybe I need talk therapy as well as I might need
Medication
or some additional services to help me regulate and get myself together.
together. Yeah, that's a really good question. So talk therapy is most effective, I think, with working through past traumatic events or current traumatic events. And there are specific modalities for people who have experienced trauma. So sometimes people might be interested in working with a therapist who's trained in something like EMDR or brain scanning, or they're just, a trauma informed therapist with whatever modality that they use. Um, Also things like anxiety and depression, OCD, personality disorders. Depending on the severity of some of the symptoms or presenting concerns, it can be also helpful to couple it with medication. And your therapist can work with you. Sometimes they will refer you out to a psychiatrist or something like that. Or even if some people come in, especially adults who've never been diagnosed with things like autism or ADHD, they will refer them to a psychologist to actually do testing for that. Yeah. So, but I think even if if you don't have one of the diagnoses that I just said, and you're just struggling in life emotionally, therapy can also help any and everyone learn more about their emotions, process their childhood, make sense of, thinking patterns, and like learn coping skills. I think that is something we don't have enough of. We all can learn more, process grief and loss, because those are things that we all experience and don't have to be like, oh, you have this condition. But if you are dealing with a loss, like a job loss, relationship loss, someone has passed, a death in the family, that can cause a lot of stress and impact your day to day functioning.
I never thought about that because, when most people hear therapy, and I think that's some of the stigma around going to a counselor, especially, something wrong. Yeah, something's wrong with you. It's really different cultures, like, you don't go to that. Well, I was going to say that
Yeah.
we're not this or we're not that. But
Well, I was to interrupt you there. Though, that's a good point when you brought up culture. Right? Because he said in his culture, they do not do counseling, and so it was very taboo. When I told him, he's like, like that's not. So how do you overcome that part when you get people and they're just constantly, well, our culture doesn't do this, or we don't do this, or this doesn't work, or
Yeah. It's very tough because I think, like, as a Black woman, it's something that in our culture, in the Black community specifically, it's starting to slowly change. Younger people in the Black community are more vocal about mental health, and that is influencing, older people, that like being able to say like, hey, you actually, the way that you handled this affected me like this. And religion can also be like a role. Some people will see like those two things. You can't do therapy and be religious, but you can. And there are actually, therapists who are religious. So I think that's a beautiful thing. You can find therapists who, one, are knowledgeable about your cultural background. So if you come from a specific culture, someone who's been able to understand that stigma and understand that some of the difficulties that come from that culture, and that can be part of the therapeutic experience, because you don't want a therapist who's not going to acknowledge the specific struggles that a Black person might have, or a Hispanic person might have, or an Asian person. Like, there are very specific cultural norms and things that are in every background. But yeah, I think normalizing that you don't have to be like something is wrong with you in order to go to therapy. Sometimes people will go to therapy and they're like, I've just been feeling off. I don't really know why, or they just want to understand more about life and how their perspective. Other people might come in and they're struggling. So it really just depends. All of it is okay. Finding a therapist is really hard because
so hard.
even once you get to the point where you're like, okay, I think I want to do this, I'm ready, then it comes the whole, like, the search, right? Like, you're getting online, you're looking through page after page,
And
financial.
your consultation, you got to go through all your business, and then you decide, gotta like business, get it all out there again.
So that is the very, very difficult part of, like, about finding it, because you want to do as much research as you can on the front end and be prepared. Initially there may be some discomfort, and like you said, being vulnerable continuously. Sometimes you'll like do a consultation and like, oh, I'm actually full until this point, or I don't take your insurance, or my rate is too high. And then,
yeah, that is a lot. So I think one thing that I've learned in going through this therapy counseling process, I think I'm trying to remember, when did I start going to therapy? And I think it was 2005. And so I've been in talk therapy for that long. I think I've had 6 therapists maybe. And those were mainly because of relocations. I moved from one state to another. Sometimes I didn't always pick it right back up, but I do find that if the therapist is engaged, I have to have someone that's going to hold me accountable. If the therapist is going to be soft, you're so sweet. I'm so sorry that we're not
No,
gonna buy it. Because I'm gonna need somebody to be like, Tiffany, you've been dealing with this for how many years, girl? You need to get it together. When are we going to actually do the work to get you to the place you need to be healed, healthy, and well?
yeah,
That's the kind of therapist I need. So when I'm looking for a therapist, I'm looking for that person that's no holds barred, kind of like me. And then, like you're saying, just education in specific areas of, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. So I'm going to look for a therapist that got the extra skills and knowledge about, okay, this is the modality. These are the different ones that speak to specifically
you're
what I'm dealing with. And I love that you said that you don't have to be dealing with a mental health diagnosis to go to therapy. Sometimes you just need to say it out loud and hear yourself say it out loud, and your best friend, not really your friend, be like, girl, do you
yeah.
what you just said? Because sometimes thinking patterns are what is the issue. And we got those thinking patterns because of life and experience and culture and all of that. So sometimes we need to rethink that and, you know, have somebody help us realize that that probably is not a good way to think about it.
Do you give homework in your sessions? Like, think homework is,
Don't give me no homework,
do
Miss
you
Brooks.
think, do you think it just depends on the person?
I think it depends on the person, but I know a lot of therapists who like fall on either side. They're always some are like, I always give homework. Every session you're gonna have homework. Or there are other therapists who like don't believe in homework because like you said, people aren't gonna do it. I personally think you have to know your clientele. I do give homework, but it's not always something that you have to like write down. Some clients are very like, journaling is a part of their therapeutic process. Sometimes my homework will be like, notice this emotion and track it. Let me know how you're feeling, something that might not be written. And there's a lot of power, like you said, Tiffany. And if you do assign homework and the client doesn't do it, it's not like school when it's like, now you're in trouble. But that's a great opportunity to talk about, what were some of the barriers in your life to practice this skill or to think more about this because it's hard. It's hard enough, like taking that hour of time and fully being present, allowing yourself to think and feel and talk to this person about your thoughts and feelings. But then you go back into your life and all those same stressors and people and situations are still there. And so the change happens, most of the change happens outside of session. How are you applying some of
What
the
you
things,
learn.
right,
Yeah.
what you learned and practicing those skills because it's hard. If you have never been taught how to communicate effectively and then you're working on it in therapy,
It was like, girl, you is hitting on my nerves.
I was like, about couples therapy.
You hear me? But that is,
that is the work right outside of session. It's like, I love couples therapy for that very reason because there is less hiding in couples therapy because
person gonna tell on you. No, you didn't do that. Stop me.
and someone might come in and like, oh, it's all the other person. Like it's them. They're the problem. And then when you see the interaction, the therapist is able to highlight
Yeah.
things that both people are doing that,
Mhm.
contribute to the dynamic and the breakdown in communication.
But do you feel though, like with couples therapy, maybe especially, that communication is one of those like major barriers that causes a lot of conflict?
Top number one concern.
Now, do you see upbringing play a big part in that part of, so me and Tiffany were married, her upbringing, my upbringing, this is why we can't
Girl, you gonna have a bad wife.
No, yes. Upbringing is huge. Upbringing is really huge. And the way that I think we're like taught to communicate is not always very effective.
Right. Because I think, we had a episode where we talked about how, if I could go back with raising kids, I should have been more open with allowing them to share with
Mm,
me their thoughts and their feelings. But my parenting style, my culture is you do what I say and
right.
sit down and leave me alone or I'm with your butt. We don't have, you have an opinion. So I do think, yeah, that's huge.
It is
Yeah.
huge.
How we train the kids talk. And I know that you and Maddie have a really great relationship where you're able to talk openly. And my kids have a great relationship with my mom where they can talk about sex and everything else very openly where I'm like, oh my God, you want to talk about that? Get ready. Yeah.
So communication, but the other thing that we've talked about a lot on our podcast is women and their body images and their self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see a lot of that? And what is something you would tell them would be a benefit of counseling for those people struggling with, their own hurts or their own self-esteem issues?
Yeah, no, that is a huge issue. I think it is very common in women. I've also see it come up with men a lot as well, struggling with self-worth and self-esteem. A lot of it can be impacted by things that happen in your childhood that you maybe not have like processed well and negative thinking patterns. That's very huge. Being able to challenge some of those negative core beliefs that we hold about ourselves and being able to reframe them and also be able to like catch some of those negative thinking patterns. We might be thinking in a very all or nothing way and it feels like a fact.
Right. That's
Yes. And not even realize that that is, you're not leaving space for the gray area, other opportunities. So being able to shift your perspective is a skill that can help a lot with self-image, self-esteem, body image, all of those things. So being able to like hold space and see your body or who you are, not just by society standards, but how you feel and other factors as well.
And I think that's what we always talk about in our episodes is like, hey, we always say go to counseling, go to therapy. Because like if you're struggling, I feel like it's hard for somebody like for me to call Tiffany, well maybe not, call somebody and say, I don't like how I look in the mirror. Da, da, da. People, you feel like people don't want to hear that, or you feel like people are too busy, or you feel like, and that's the benefit of having a counselor is that like you can be that authentic, just blah mess, and your job is to let you be okay with that, then process it, and like,
Yeah, that's safe for you to say the thing that you might have shame saying to someone else or someone else, in that relationship. If you need space to just to process something, they might want to support you, want to do that, but they might not know how. They might not have the capacity. And that's why therapy is so helpful because that person is going to show up and be there.
okay, say somebody maybe they don't have insurance or they don't have enough money to pay for counseling, right? And I have people in my life who say I need counseling, but I just can't afford that. What are some things that you could maybe recommend to somebody if counseling is not available to them? What are some things that they read or do that would help with it, maybe their mental?
Yeah. No, that's a really great question. That is a huge issue when it comes to mental health care, the accessibility of it, and that not everyone does have insurance or has insurance that will pay for it. And that becomes a barrier. So if there are people who are interested listening to wellness podcasts, I think it's very helpful. There are a lot of different books that help support people depending on like whatever their mental health concern is. And looking to create your own self-care practices. That definitely is not, you can't necessarily self-care your way out of depression. However, it is helpful to create practices that support your well-being and taking that step. And there are some therapists, like private practices that have interns or, people who offer low cost or free services. So I would also look into.
I like that you said that you can't self-care yourself out of something, and I think that's a good point because I think a lot of people think if I take a bath and eat some chocolate and read a book for 30 minutes that I'm going to be healed when it's so much deeper than that. I mean, we all need self-care and we all need a moment to break away from the noise, but it's not going to heal you by itself.
no man.
No, it's definitely not. And it is, it can be helpful in the moment. However, like you said, it's not going to get to like some of the underlying.
Because really, I feel like the self-care is helping, like in the moment, it's going to relax me, but it's not solving my problem, the deep core root of it.
Yeah,
So,
you put a Band-Aid on top of a festering wound and it's just gonna keep being nasty and gross
Okay. Clean it out. Okay. That's a great. And that's therapy in a nutshell. Then he said, here's this. You can't keep putting it. So how long? So I think some people think they're going to go to counseling and see these results in like 3 sessions and be a new person. What is the realistic expectation of change through
Do
counseling?
you want me to answer that, bro? You didn't keep taking you to therapy. And you have some real change in your life. It ain't no 3 sessions. I would say if you got some results in 3 sessions, that was because you were serious. You went in there.
You were faking it.
No. You were serious. You went in there.
I think you're faking it.
No, Mabel, you went in there. You're lying. You went in there. You were serious. You told a therapist A to Z, and she told you to do A, B, C, D.
No way.
And you absolutely went and did A, B, C, D, and put it.
No way. No way.
That's when you were serious.
No way. You can't even change habits under 30 days. If you results.
That's an interesting word because it's like, how does someone interpret it, right? Like you said, if someone has 3 sessions and after 3 sessions, they practice a mindful meditation or something, or they responded differently in a conflict, they might feel like therapy's working, I'm good. That is a first step, right? Like you are practicing the skill. But to your point, it's a practice, right? You're going to continue to have other situations that challenge you or where you need to use this skill. And it can, I think, a more realistic timeline for long lasting change, depending on the situation, very much depending on the situation. Because there are people who come in with a concern, like if it's a couple, for example, and they really want to work on communication, they could be in therapy for 6 months to a year before they're seeing that consistent use of those communication skills. And once you start working on one thing, typically it leads to other areas of growth and other.
So do you do family counseling too? Or when you say you do kids and you do parents, you do.
Yeah, so I don't do family counseling, but there are a lot of like there are licensed marriage and family therapists, and there are other licensed mental health counselors that do family therapy. And so family therapy is with, one or more members of that immediate family. And it could be with the child and then with the parent. Sometimes it's with siblings and the parent. Um, and it is, very effective. Some sessions, I know a lot of family therapists who will meet, like if they're meeting with a child, and a lot of the concerns include the full family system. They'll do both. So they'll do individual sessions with the child and then some family sessions with the parent also.
So when you work with kids, do you bring the parent in sometimes to make sure you're getting, like, we have 2 boys, all of our whole family is there, but we have 2 boys who are ADHD and have some other trauma from their childhood. And so they're their own counseling, but we always come in the beginning or the end.
Yeah.
To do like a 10, 15 minute, like, this is what we need to work on. These are our issues this week. And then we leave. The question I'm trying to think of is, do you get enough from that parent in that, short interview to kind of know where to work with the child moving forward in that session?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it depends a lot on the developmental stage of the child. When they're younger, the parent involvement is extremely important and will be fundamental with your work with the child. When you're working with teens and young adults, it varies. Sometimes a lot of the concerns can be, clashes with the parent. And so then continues to be vital to bring the parent in and them be a part of the session. There are other times where it's appropriate with adolescents where you might do the check-ins with the parent periodically, but the focus is more on the specific, like that adolescent or that teen's mental health and them working through their coping skills. And it might just be an overview to the parent of like, hey, this is what they're practicing. This is how you can support that. Yeah. But a lot of it, that open communication between a child and a parent, like you were saying, Tiffany, is a newer parenting concept. And so it's very helpful to help to facilitate on both sides the perspectives. So there is.
And I think it is. Well, I think it's hard too. Like, you know, it's hard because yes, you want your child to communicate with you, right? You do want open communication. On the other hand, sometimes I feel like you're still a freaking child and I'm an adult and I hear you, but I don't care. And I feel like it's almost getting to the point in society that like you can't do that anymore. Like you can't. And I feel like yes, you should be heard. I respect that. I agree with that. I was raised that way. I raised my daughter that way. But like on the other hand, I still feel like there has to be an authority role that says, "Great, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but that's not changing anything. These are still the results." And I kind of feel like counseling might help with like a parent to still have the power to say that because if you don't bring the parent in, sometimes I feel like the child thinks they have all this power. And I think there still has to be an established, like, this is your parent, you have to be respect, in healthy, such safe situation. Or,
No, it helps.
follow the guidance of the parent. You can have a voice, but it doesn't mean we have to listen to you. And I think that's a little frustrating that they feel like just because I have a voice, you have to listen to it and do what I tell you.
And that's the thing. It's like listening and now doing what you want to do is different. Like there are still boundaries and rules and things that need to be enforced. You can be heard and you're still going to have to do these dishes or whatever the case may be.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think being able to help facilitate those conversations of it doesn't have to be this, argument, conflict every time. We can, as your parent, I have these boundaries and these are your options and these are your choices. However, these are the rules, these are the boundaries, and this is what's going to happen if you don't.
So to anybody listening that might say, well, I don't think I'm here. I don't know if I'm therapy. What is something you would say to
I think something I would say to them is if you're feeling stuck in any area of your life,
them? Any area.
any area of your life, feeling stuck, feeling confused, feeling pain. Therapy, it can be a great opportunity to facilitate a space where you become unstuck. And I like to think I think that's a great word because you might be stuck, like, I can't get out of bed, or you might be stuck, I'm struggling to know what to do with this relationship. Those are two different things, but that same feeling of feeling stuck, feeling lost, um, therapy can help facilitate you feeling like you have a direction of where to go and you're practicing skills and new thought processes or reframing your thought processes to feel more empowered to live the life that you really
I think everybody that's 17, 18, 19 that has no clue about what am I going to do with my life, you probably should go to a therapist.
yeah.
They should help you kind of figure out what you love, what you don't love. It's not even necessarily I have issues. It's just I need to figure out my life. Yeah.
Right.
And I think too, like counseling, I think like you said, with like that age group, I guess it happens to older, but I'm seeing it more with the age group because I have 14, 15, 16, 19-year-old kids. And, they don't know how to process their emotions. And they get anxiety and it literally causes an illness or, fear of driving, all this other stuff. And so like I feel like as a parent, we don't know how to really get to you need therapy to help you because I think as a parent you get frustrated or you say like, suck it up, you'll be fine, suck it up, doesn't matter. But they need somebody to say, I'm scared or I don't know, I have this pressure at school or whatever, and this person to process it for them.
Exactly. No, that's a huge point. A lot of people struggle with, like you said, recognizing and regulating their emotions. And anxiety is a huge
Yeah. And I think that the thing that's interesting to me, and I'm 43,
one.
I don't think I heard of counseling to the depth that I have heard it until my daughter was 16 and had a panic attack for like 2 days. She's crying. I had no idea what's going on. People told me, you need to put her in counseling. She's having some kind of panic attack. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And now our whole family, I mean, it's just like this thing, but up until my 30s, I mean, I've had counseling a little bit here before and there, but really up until then, I didn't realize all the things counseling can do. So I think our older generation, it's not something we heard, like anxiety. Even when we were younger, kids didn't have ADHD. You were just bad.
Right, right.
The bread and the sugars and the red dyes, and you just bad. Like, it's just so different between generations. So sometimes I feel like my age group and above, it's really hard to look at, go to or your child and not be like, oh, they didn't discipline them enough, or they didn't do this, they didn't, it's very hard. Now, this younger generation, it is all about counseling and mental health, which is good, but I think there's a line where there's a little bit of a growing curve
Yeah.
or like
He's still growing.
Yeah, no, there is definitely a curve. There is definitely a curve. And I think the way that we talk about mental health, I think will continue to evolve from this generation and onwards. There's still a lot that we are learning about our brain and how it works and our emotions and how our behaviors are interconnected with our thoughts and our, brain chemistry. So there's a lot more to learn, and there will be more modalities and treatment methods that come out to help things like ADHD. And sometimes, I mean, in the mental health community, there is even some debate around diagnoses in general and how and pathologize people. Other times it's very affirming to have, something that you're struggling with or behavior be named in a certain way. So I think that will continue to evolve. And the more that we talk about it, like you said, it helps to reduce stigma. It helps to normalize.
stigma is a good word because I remember when we were talking about the boys specifically, Nick was like, I don't want them to be labeled. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. Do you
Right,
want them to be labeled ADHD or do you want them labeled the bad kid?
right.
Like, which one do you want? Because either way, they're going to get labeled. So we have to treat one or just manage the other. So
Right. That's a great point of like treatment versus managing certain behaviors. And I think that is a great like perception change of like, oh, a label is a negative thing. Being able to see it as some people find it very empowering of like, I have ADHD and that means I know what I'm experiencing. I'm not bad. I'm not crazy. This is the way that my brain works and I can learn specific strategies and methods so that I still function well in society.
And I think that falls into adults because if you have ADHD your whole life and your parent, you didn't know about it, and you've struggled your whole life with how you handle situations, now you're 40 going, oh shit, it's because I'm ADHD.
That's
You know,
right.
I'm now like very aware of it because I can see adults in
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Personally,
I'm diagnosed.
and so a lot of people find it like their lives change when they realize, oh, there might be a medication or, a behavior strategy that can help me hold a job and, manage relationships. And now I feel lighter. I don't feel like I need to now cope with, drugs and alcohol or other things to make my life better. I know like other strategies that are healthy and I can have the life that I really want to have.
Now I have one more question, and if Tiffany has anything, but how much of an impact do you feel that social media has on our youth and our adults?
Too much.
It has a huge impact. It has a huge impact, especially on the youth and young adults, right? Young adults now, I guess who are born in like the early 2000s, they have basically been on social media
All they like.
their whole life. And same now with, kids, they get cell phones earlier and earlier. Elementary school now, they have full blown social media pages. No, it has a huge impact. They all know what TikTok is. They all know what Instagram is, and Twitter, and all the things. And when I was working as a school counselor, we would see a lot of cyberbullying. Um, we'd have to educate students around sending sexual or nude pictures as a minor and the impact that that can have on circulating those things. So it has a huge impact. And then in general, just like the constant scrolling and absorbing these, ideas or images, can have a huge impact on their brain. It's still developing. So it shapes their perception of their body and their perception of what it means to be successful or beautiful and these concepts. It's more influenced by that as opposed to
Yeah.
themselves, their own thoughts or their family values or whatever the case might be. Um, so social media does have a huge impact. It also impacts adults too. We spend a lot more time connecting with others on social media, but it can create this false sense of community and connection instead of calling someone, you send like a message or you'll look at their page and feel like you're connected to them. So it does have a huge impact on all of us. It's not all bad, but it's something to be aware of. It can increase, feelings of anxiety, and being mindful of that. Sometimes we need breaks away from it.
Yeah. You do.
And
Well, and let me say it's like is it Pavlov's response. So like if my phone's not silent and I get a notification, it's like this instant, like, let me look.
yep,
And I have to be with people I care about, or that's why I have to silence my phone so much because I feel like I'm like the dog response where I'm just like, the bell rings, let me go eat. Like the bell rings, let me pick up the phone. And I think there is just as much with youth, but I think adulthood affects too because people are watching people and like, oh, you're doing this and not doing that,
Right.
or you were here and you weren't there, or this person had this job and this person for adults. I think it's horrible for children, and I wish none of my children got phones until they were 16. And if I could go back, well, the two younger boys don't now. We've learned through the older, but I would limit it. I understand that you feel like they're going to be out of the crowd or something, but I would take that all day over the exposure to that stuff all the time.
Yeah, you have a lot less control over what they're exposed to because
Yeah,
once you're on the internet, it's a lot.
I just don't think my personality allows me to be on social media like that. I maybe I have ADHD or something because I scroll one, two, three. Oh, I'm done. Like,
No, I mean,
something else to do. Let me go to my Candy Crush or something like that.
and we scroll. But the device is probably, I know for sure, the device has to come up in counseling with married couples.
oh yeah.
Whether you're texting people, whether you're on Facebook, this little device is the biggest distraction in our lives.
Being present.
Yes, it distracts all of us from being present. We're not as in tune with our emotions because if we are feeling bored or stressed or worried, we can, like you said, entertain ourselves.
And have something to distract us, and we're like, "Ooh, okay, now I'm playing my Candy Crush or
Yeah.
whatever."
And so we're not really sitting with emotion or processing it effectively.
Can you explain real quick, sorry, when you say sit with your emotion, can you explain what that means?
Yes. So sitting with your emotion means learning to, sometimes it can include tolerating discomfort because if you're sitting with sadness or disappointment or guilt or an emotion that you would like to run away from or you would like to not feel, learning that you can sit with it, that you can tolerate it, that you don't have to numb it, and that emotions will come and go like waves. So being able to feel more in tune with it. And a lot of times emotions are telling us something. If we're feeling sad, if we're feeling uncomfortable, if we're feeling worried, feeling like you can like tune in more to yourself and decide what you may need based on that emotion. So if you are feeling sad, maybe you do need to cry, maybe you need to release something, maybe you're grieving, maybe that is something that was important to you. And in order for you to process it, the loss of it, sadness is, important. Or maybe you're feeling anxious or worried. And so you need to take some time to identify some of the thoughts that are impacting that anxiety. And there's something maybe you can do, like there's an action that you can take to ease that worry or anxiety about the thing. Or maybe you can reframe it and your thoughts are creating the anxiety and you can challenge those thoughts to bring yourself more peace. So it's a way to be more in tune with what you need by sitting with a feeling. And I think that's something that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And we are not always taught to do that. Like as kids, our parents might not have had the skill set to allow you to learn how to identify and name your feelings and space to feel them and then how to handle them. So I think that's like the 3-step process. And a lot of people are just like, I just need to suck it up. I'm not allowed to feel this. Or I just need to stop feeling that. And so whatever I can get to, whether it's the phone, whether it's just your alcohol, whether it's people, whatever the thing is where I can stop feeling this thing, they will do that instead of learning to be more in tune with themselves.
Very good. Thank you so much. You were great today.
All right. So how can people, if they're looking for a therapist in your area, how can they reach out and find you and see if you're a great fit for them?
Yes, no, I would love to. So I work for a private practice in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's called Lifeology Counseling. And you can go to our website. You will find my name, or you can send me an email. It is Brooke, BROOKEK, at wefixbrains.com. I know it's very funny.
I love
I think you remember.
I know.
But yeah, reach out. I would be happy.
Do they have to live in North Carolina? I know there's certain.
Yes, I know with licensure, they do have to live in North Carolina. but I do take Blue Cross and Blue Shield insurance and Medcost insurance. I work with teens, adults, and couples. So very excited to be working full time in private practice. And even if like I'm not the best fit for you, I always try and, connect people to someone else in my practice or other practices in the local area.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
here.
for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
We love this conversation. Hopefully, our audience got something out of it. That mental health issues and therapy, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
Feel-
nothing wrong with it. We all
yeah,
need it. I
Yes.
feel, yeah.
nice. All right. Well, this has been Pardon Our Honesty. Please like, share, and subscribe. This was a great episode on counseling. We all need it. That was the thing. We all need it. So until next time, thanks again, Mrs.
All right. Thank you for having me.